Thank you for attending the 2020 Sunstone Digital Symposium, Session 332, titled Healing Mormon Trauma Through Self-Expression. The audio from this session will be available for purchase at sunstone.org after the symposium. The video recording of this session will be available in the Whova app for the remainder of 2020. There will be a Q&A session, a Q&A opportunity after this session, so please type your questions into the Whova app to be addressed at that time. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There is more than one way to Mormon." We invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing at sunstone.org. About this presentation. Quote, "Art is a wound turned into light," end quote. This presentation will explore how art, personal expression, and narrative therapy can be used as a modality for healing from trauma. I'll take a second to introduce you to our speakers before we begin. Kimberly Anderson is a transgender woman who has served as a prior vice president for Affirmation. She is a current board member for Parity, an LGBTQ+ non-denominational religious service organization based in New York City, as well as the Truth and Transparency Foundation, a nonprofit investigative newsroom dedicated to promoting transparency within religious institutions. She is a practicing marriage and family therapist in the Sacramento and San Francisco Bay areas. Heather Cook grew up in the FLDS and ran away from the community at age 10. She used art and photography as a lifeline of survival as she found her footing. She is now the mother of 5 children and a community organizer for Short Creek, where she practices photography. I'll now pass the floor to our presenters.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll wait for Heather to join us before I jump in. Heather, can you unmute your video and your audio, please?
So,
there we go. There's step 1.
can you see me?
Can't see you yet. That'll happen.
Hold on.
So while you're doing that, okay, here we go. Awesome.
Okay.
So I'm going to, Heather, if it's okay with you,
One
I'm just going to jump in and start talking a little bit about what we're doing today. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and actually the introduction, I forgot to mention that I'm now practicing in Utah through Flourish Counseling and through Rebirth Health Center in Salt Lake City. So I'm actually practicing marriage and family therapist intern here in Utah as well. I also have a Master of Fine Arts degree from Utah State University, and I've taught art for 8, 9, 10 years along the Wasatch Front at a university level. And I've been a practicing photographer for the past 30 years, hence my prop over my shoulder. That's my safety blanket of my 8x10 view camera. Heather and I have met several times over the past month, I'd say. And I was actually asked by Lindsay to do a session with Heather for Sunstone. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll get to talk about my stuff. Heather get to talk about her stuff. And as I got to know Heather, I'm like, no. People out here, out in the, you guys know about me already. So my job today is not to talk about me. My job is to let Heather share her story. And my job is really to signal boost and amplify for her. So you're not going to hear much about me. Instead, you're going to hear a lot about Heather. And I'm okay. Are we okay with that? Are you okay with that, Heather?
Of course.
Okay, cool. I briefly want to put this into a psychological framework since I'm a therapist, and we are going to be talking about trauma. Trauma, as defined by the APA, which I'm a member of, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, excuse me. There's my early morning drink coming in handy. Strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea or burping possibly. while these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. And I know that for many people I work with trauma, moving through the trauma is a really difficult thing. I'm also a certified trauma specialist through the Arizona Trauma Institute, and I've worked in Native spaces, working with trauma, youth spaces, adult spaces, working with trauma, and LGBT spaces, specifically working with lots of trauma. I'm super excited to talk to Heather about some stuff that she's gone through. I'm going to let you, Heather, let's first also make sure everyone knows this. This is not a therapy session. In this capacity, I'm acting as a therapeutically informed friend to Heather. And we talked about this. She might experience some of these symptoms of trauma today during the broadcast, during this episode. If she does, we'll kind of go into some modalities or some techniques to recover from that emotional deregulation. And Heather's okay with that happening. My job is not to push those things to happen. My job is to contain those things if they do happen, and to provide an environment of trust and safety. Also, let's do this. For the Q&A period at the end of the session, let's kind of keep it specific to the FLDS trauma and art thing that we're talking about here. General questions about FLDS culture and how you escape and how those things that are more scintillating and scandalous, those can be found elsewhere, and that's not the focus of today's session. This is more talking about Heather's process, maybe a little bit about her story and her journey through her art creating and her art making and her own emotional healing. So with a lot of talk by Kimberly, who said she wasn't going to talk, I'm going to give it to you, Heather.
Okay, remind me again what I'm doing.
Okay, so here's what I love. So we have spent probably 4, 5, 6 hours just talking about our stuff. And in one of our practice things, I said, we're just going to talk. So we literally are going to talk. I want you to give a brief introduction to yourself, maybe that goes a little bit beyond what Jennifer gave. Talk a little bit about why you were compelled to make art. And as it seems kind of natural, then I'll start sharing some slides that you have given to me to share today.
Okay. My actual drive of what drives me to create art is I used to watch my grandma paint, and she was amazing at it, and she didn't do it very often, but every once in a while then she would just sit there and paint, and I would watch her, and in that world she could be herself and and let go of things that weren't necessarily something that could be expressed in any other way. And so sorry.
So how did that influence you? Take a deep breath. This is we're just gonna be chill for a minute. How did it influence you? Seeing her do her art, what did it do for you? What did it share with you? What did it teach you?
So she gave me my first paintbrush that I ever got in my whole life, and it was on my 4th birthday, which is actually my lucky birthday because I was born on the 4th. And it's the first thing I ever remember getting. It's the first possession I ever remember having that was mine.
That paintbrush.
It was a paintbrush.
Do you still have it?
I don't.
Could we find
but I
one that's
remember
similar to it? Yes.
it was the Crayola brand. It was right when they first started coming out, like getting big. And it was red and blue. There was 2 of them. And they came in a little book that you dipped the paintbrush in water and painted the book. And it had the paint on it. It was right when they very first came out. And I don't know, it changed my whole world. Ever since then, I always just wanted to do art and paint. And she would paint, and my dad also would paint, only when our life was happy, though. He never painted when our life got really, really struggly, which was interesting because I painted more when my life was a struggle, and I paint less when my life is happy. So it's kind of a flip there.
But you did that in response to what? Why did you start painting in times of trouble? What was that about?
So my grandma was my world. She was my everything to me. And when I turned 9, well, really when I turned 5, then we moved from Hilldale to Salt Lake City. And we weren't allowed to be around my grandma very much. And then when I turned 10, when we left the religion, I wasn't allowed to see her at all. I haven't seen her since I was 10.
Do you know if she's still alive?
She is. She actually lives here in this town where I am.
Oh, wow.
I hear things about her, and other people tell me that they've seen her, but I never have. I sang her happy birthday once though. Um,
A form
that
of
was
art
fun.
and expression and love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So you
so,
started painting in your times of trouble
yeah.
as a response to, let's
I
kind of
started,
tease some of this out. Yeah.
yeah, I started painting as a response to the trauma. So when,
Take a breath. It's okay. People may be wondering, what in the world kind of trauma does a person from the FLDS culture, from the person of the FLDS background, what kind of trauma could you possibly have? And it's an idyllic landscape. You have all these friends, you have all your siblings, you have 30 mothers. I mean, that's a gross overgeneralization and a stereotype. So I apologize for that. But that's what we think that the non-FLDS Mormons think about you guys down there in Shore Creek. That's what we think. What could so possibly be so wrong about that lifestyle? Tell us about some of your trauma, what you experienced as a child.
okay. So I was born into the idea of a utopia, where the community came together and everybody worked as one and everybody lived in this utopian society. And my dad, his heart is so pure and literally made of gold. And he believed in this idea with all of his heart and all of his soul. And all he ever wanted was another wife. His whole life, ambition, his goal, everything, all he wanted was a second wife. And so my entire life was around trying to be good enough to have a second wife in our home. And we never ever were. Our home was never good enough to accomplish that goal. But the reason why was because my dad, he's really easy to manipulate because his heart is so pure. And my mom is one of the most strong, courageous women I've ever met. And bless her heart and soul, she is outspoken. She is not afraid to say what she wants to say and do it how she wants to do it. And there's no way to live in a world where men rule the society with an outspoken woman. She started teaching women about birth control. And that was like the biggest no-no you could ever do.
Yeah, she was willing to buck tradition and convention and teach that to you guys, to the girls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
what was that like, a life of always having to be perfect, always having to be good so that your household could qualify for your father to get a second wife so that you could achieve salvation and exaltation? What was that like for you, a 4, 5, 6, 10-year-old child? What was that like for you?
So that part of my life didn't start until we moved to Salt Lake City and we were around all of them. So when we still lived in Hilldale, I lived in Hilldale from when I was born to when I was 5 years old. And from that point, we lived in poverty. We were on the bottom of the bottom. There was only one family below us. And my mom was outspoken and pretty much kicked out of everything. And my dad worked full time to try to support us, which then he was giving all of his money to the church. So we weren't supported anyways. We were practically starving to death. But it left me in a world unlike any other world I've ever known of, where I was free to do whatever I wanted. And I was surrounded by a bunch of people that loved me and adored me. My childhood, besides the fact that I was starving to death and didn't have my needs covered, was so full of love and happiness and fun. Like, we would go on adventures all over the countryside. And it was our countryside, mind you. I thought the whole entire world was just Hilldale. There was no other world than that. I didn't know about people or places, other mountains or anything. It was just Hilldale. And I remember the first time I went to Salt Lake City and I learned that there was more than just Hilldale. It was so shocking. And there was just people everywhere. So many people. And that was kind of crazy. So I was 6 years old the first time I went to Salt Lake City and saw all of those people. And then that's when we moved up where we were around the Steeds and the Jeffs and the Warners. There's other families, but I can't remember. And that's when our life had to be perfect. And that's when our life got a little bit crazy.
Describe the crazy that happened. How did that shift? What was that shift like? What was that about?
So we went from lower class poverty up to about middle class sort of. So at this point we had food, clothes, a house, a little bit of money to do extra things. That was the first year we got bikes, rollerblades, other things I can't remember.
Kind of living high on the hog, maybe it felt like.
Yes, but my life got more stressful at that time, because then we were expected to be at church. I hated church so bad.
Why did you hate church?
Stuffy rooms and just sit there. I don't know. Who likes church? No one likes church.
Now we're speaking to an audience where some people may like church and some people may feel differently about church. I couldn't stand the only part of church, and I'll get really a little personal right now. The only part about church I ever liked was sitting in sacrament with my head down and my elbows on my knees and my mom scratching my back. That was the only part of church I liked. Oh, and then after sacrament, all the teachers, we prepared the sacrament. So we took down the sacrament. So all the teachers got to get the bread, and we made these bread balls out of the white bread, and we ate the white bread balls. We felt very rebellious, and we were hungry. So we ate this leftover sacrament bread. You guys out there, you guys know what I'm talking about. You know, that's true. So what I want to do is maybe scoot through some of your art and talk about like maybe the genesis of the art, what you might have been feeling at the time that you were creating the art, and just kind of maybe go through some of those slides.
That would probably be easier.
So I'm going to share the screen, and you will be able to see this. Oh, I don't want to share that particular. That's what I want to share. All right.
Oh, yeah.
So can you see this?
The Alta Academy.
Tell me about this. Oh, wait. So actually, I think it's sharing the wrong screen. Let me stop the sharing. I want to share a different screen. Why is it sharing Alta Academy?
I don't know, but you can do that one if you want.
Is this the one? Can you see the one of you in the bed? Okay, that's the one. That's where I want to start.
Okay, so this one I did my first year of school. It was my first year of public school outside of the religion, and so being in the religion, life was full of adventure and fun, and we were always doing things and being a part of something, whether we were picking in the garden or canning all together or listening to someone tell stories while we picked stuff for hours and hours. Like, for me, being in the religion was actually a fun time. And this was my very first year out of the religion. And my world was scary and bleak, and I didn't have family. This was the first year I realized I was alone.
And who is this for seeing in the picture?
So this is me in my bed, and I have no actual possessions, but there is mice on the floor for some reason.
A dotted mouse and a striped mouse.
It's awesome. So true.
And you had curly hair, it looks like, back then.
I think that was my representation of girls, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Because my hair has always been straight. But straight hair is what boys have, not girls.
Oh, okay. So you were actually learning about gender roles at this point in your life.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about this this drawing.
Okay. So this drawing is it was a school project, and I was supposed to write something that had meaning in my life. And I wrote all of the boxes from all of the moves, because from when I turned 5 years old until 2014, when I actually bought the home that my mom grew up in, that my grandpa built, I have moved, I think, 47 times.
Is that what we counted last time?
6 months. Yeah.
47 times? That's a lot.
I think it was 47.
Which, by the way, dear listener, moving that many times, not having a stable place to live in, not knowing where you're going next, leaving your friends, not being able to form new friendship relations moving forward, these are all small t, or what we call little t, trauma events that you've experienced now 47 times?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about what's in the drawing. The boxes, from the moves, the labels, the magic, money for the rich, canned food for the poor, coffee for women. These were boxes that your family used to move in, or is this text and stuff that you remember seeing on these boxes? Tell us about the text.
So the boxes represent the moves, and the text on the boxes represent the things that were in my world that actually didn't make much sense. And so now that I'm not in 8th grade anymore, they actually make a lot more sense now that I'm staring at them. So coffee for women, supersized coffee, represented the women at different times, the women would join together in different homes and gather for their coffee circles and their coffee sessions. And that's where they did all of their social and their therapy sessions and their talk about whatever, and whatever women talk about at coffee. We all do it still today.
So this is funny because as a traditional, is there a traditional Mormonism? Kimberly, back up. As a Salt Lake City based Mormon, coffee for women, that was like, it would have been postum for women or pero for women or hot chocolate for women. It would have never been coffee for women because of the Doctrine and Covenants, Section 89. We interpret it as no coffee. Clearly, your group of people that you were raised with interpreted things differently, or at that point, and you said, to hell with Section 89, we're drinking our coffee.
I don't really know what they decided, but I have had coffee in my life, my whole life. My dad's had drank coffee. My mom's drank coffee. They would meet at the stores and have coffee. So they apparently interpreted that one different.
Quite a bit different. So, and I don't want, my job is not to interpret or psychoanalyze any of this.
No, I just think it's funny.
No, me too, like the box of magic for ages 8 to 16. So now you're in a time of your life, you said you were 8th grade. So you're what, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old?
I don't even know.
Well, you're in this age group though, that would have had access to magic.
To magic. So magic is something I would never give up. My mom said from the moment I could talk, I talked about magic, and it was an idea they never could shake from my brain. Magic is just a part of who I am, and it's in all my drawings in one way or another. And I honestly don't know how it got here or gets into my paintings. When I pulled this up to do this presentation, I was actually quite shocked to see magic there.
As one of your earliest drawings. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So canned food for the poor is tipped over and empty.
Symbolic.
Money for the rich is tiny but in front. Glass dishes are shattered and dropped on something that may contain grenades, bombs, and pistols. I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah. Well, so this may speak to your internal struggle of feeling some fragility at some times, and also knowing that if you dropped, I mean, again, I don't want to psychoanalyze, but it's interesting that the fragile things are tipped upside down on top of a potentially dangerous source of explosions. Warning may explode.
Oh yeah. And in my life at this time, it absolutely was dangerous and about to explode. So makes total sense.
Yeah. Tell us about the rose.
Okay, so the rose. The rose I actually painted. It's the only painting I've ever done of a rose. And I painted it because of my grandma. She had a rose garden, and it was the only thing that she had that was hers in this little section of a desolate desert yard. And we would go sit in the rose garden, and she would just sit there and stare at her roses. And I never understood as a little tiny kid what she was staring at or why she was staring at it, but she just loved to stare at roses. And so I painted this rose, and I painted it in school, and I brought it home to show my family, and they were sitting in the living room, and it started a massive battle. And they all wanted the painting in one way or another. And my family at this time was extremely fragile and falling apart. They all needed to go their separate ways in one way or another and grow up a little bit. I think that we banded together and we became strong as a family together to make it through the world. Like when we left the religion, we were a bunch of kids trying to learn how to adapt to a world that didn't make any sense to us. Ordering food from a restaurant was absolutely terrifying. Just talking to someone. In fact, it took almost 5 years for my sister to order her own food. I did all of that for her.
So I'm going to unshare for a second. Would you say then that ordering food, being with people, being in the world, this was traumatic for you guys? This was traumatic for your family?
Absolutely. Adjusting to the outside world was the most traumatic, hardest thing I ever did. Trying to go back to school and stare at paper that I didn't know what it said and be expected to hold up to a standard and a level that didn't make any sense to me. The first time somebody said, "May the force be with you," I was like, is that in the Bible?
Pretty much for many people, it is in the Bible.
To their Bible, absolutely. But I had no
Right.
idea that that was a Star Wars
It's
reference.
Lucas 3:5, yeah.
Exactly. And then we also pretty much lived like we were coming out of a third world country because I don't have any records. I had to go figure out how to get my social security number. I had to figure out how to get my birth certificate.
Small T, big T trauma.
I had to figure out how to put myself into school.
Big T trauma, yeah. So you were adultified, you were parentified, and I'm using some psychological jargon. In other words, you were forced to be an adult before your time. You were forced to be a parent before your time.
Absolutely.
There is a diagnostic term called adjustment disorder that is part of the trauma response for many, many individuals. I just keep hearing that kind of this shift from one life to the other caused you these difficulties as part of a grander arc of trauma in your life. All right, I'm gonna go back to sharing the screen.
Perfect. Okay, remind me where I was at in the story.
Oh, I don't want to share this one. I want to share the other one.
Where'd the rose go?
I don't know. Where did the rose go? Kimberly Anderson, where did the rose go? Oh, hell's bells. There it is. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, I think because I had it full screen. Now I got to go back to Zoom. Share screen. Here we go. All right. Thanks, kids, for sticking with me here. Finish the story about the rose. Why did your family have such a tremendous response to this painting of the rose? What did it represent to them?
I think that each of them saw something different that it represented, but in more ways than any, I think it was my family's last attempt to hold on to each other in a crumbling world where we couldn't anymore.
So this was an anchor, a mental anchor for them.
Yeah. And so what actually ended up happening to it is we were moving for one of the 9 millionth times. And someone very, very special to me in my life and in my world actually stole it from my bedroom.
Are they still special in your life?
Yes.
They still are. Okay.
So she has it, and she took it for me, and she told me, "You're welcome to have it back whenever you want it." But there was a part of me that could never, ever take it back from her because I think that it anchors her to me as much as me to her. And so, in reality, it served its purpose and it did what it needed to do.
I would call that on permanent loan.
Exactly. So I've never seen this painting since that day, besides in this actual picture that I asked her to take and send to me for this. So it's kind of cool to look at it.
Nice. So is this a sketch that the rose was based on?
No. This was... This one's funny. Okay. He might kill me for telling you this story, but...
So I'll tell it anyway. So. That's right. You tell the story. This is your presentation. He can kill you later. We can worry about that.
So I was 16, I think, 15 or 16. And I was sitting in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in a house that my sister and her boyfriend were renting so that they could take care of me while I was in school. And I was so angry and mad because school was so incredibly hard for me because I had to learn so much. I was learning 24/7. So I would get up at 6, go to school till 3, come home, and we would sit from 3 to 6. And my sister would tell me what it was that they were trying to teach me so that then I could learn what it was they were trying to teach me.
So you were being taught how to learn.
Exactly. And then I would get free time from 6 to 8, and then I would have to go to bed in order to get up and do the next day. And I was frustrated and mad because I couldn't do anything that normal kids were doing. I couldn't do after school programs or sports or have friends or do anything because I didn't fit into that world. And I told my sister, I was like, this is stupid and I'm done. And about 15 minutes later, then there was a knock on the door. And okay, I got to back up a little tiny bit. When I was 11, then I got sent to Canada to live with a different family while my dad figured out how to keep my sisters away from Warren. Mm-hmm. And I got adopted by a family up there that raised me for about 3 years. And so from Canada to Coeur d'Alene is only 3 hours. And so he and that family, his wife and the kids, would come down randomly when they came down to go shopping and visit me. And so he knocked on the door and he had his nephew, his little brother, and one of his cousins with him. And so has a family. He's in his like 40s-ish. Mm-hmm. And his nephew, his brother, and his cousin were all my age. Mm. And so he picked us up and took us shopping, and I decided that I was going to have a boyfriend.
Just like out of the blue. Today's the day I'm going to have a boyfriend.
Today's the day I want a boyfriend. Wow. And I picked his nephew, which he was really mad about, but it was funny.
So how does the rose play into this story?
So the rose is what I drew when I went back home on the day that I decided that I was going to have my first boyfriend. That's where the rose comes in.
Okay. I don't even want to try to unpack that. And I'm glad because I'm not your therapist. I'm just your friend.
Right.
But you and I are going to have a chat about this later on because that's pretty rich. All right, we're going to go back to the screen sharing. Why is this doing this? Preview wants to do something funny for me. Stop sharing. I've moderated 5 sessions and I've been in one this week and it's because I had it on full screen. Okay, hold on.
Oh yeah, you said that last time too.
Clearly I don't learn from my mistakes. All right, so next. Tell us about this.
Okay, this one I painted. My mom decided that she had had enough of the religion and the people and everybody telling her what to do, and that she would rather be homeless on the Oregon coast than live anywhere where she'd ever been before. Mm. And so she packed up and she took my little sister and she went over there, and she would force me, because I was still underage, to go over there and spend the summers with her. And I absolutely hated it. But now it's some of my favorite times. But
so this is an interesting representation because on the Oregon coast, you may or may not remember this, but tell us about the painting. I don't want to feed lines to you.
You're totally good. So this painting, me and my little sister were sitting on the coast and we were literally homeless with our mom. And she would go to the local churches, the non-denominational churches, and she would make friends with the different people there, and she would make deals with them to stay in their homes, and then she would provide a service of some type. Like there was one family that was going out of town, and so she offered to house sit their house and take care of their animals, and then we could stay at their house. And so for 2 of the weeks we were in this little cottage up in the mountains with goats and chickens and cows, and it was absolutely magical. It was so fun. I loved it. But most of the time we were actually sitting on the coast. And so me and my little sister started painting paintings to sell on the side of the road so that we could eat. And this is the very first painting that I painted. So I keep the first of every painting I paint. And this was one of the first ones we did.
So you actually had a little cottage industry of finding materials, finding paint somewhere, buying paint somewhere, getting your stuff, painting the scenes that you saw in front of you, or are these imaginary scenes? Because often I see some whales in the distance and I see palm trees and a lighthouse, and I've been up and down the Oregon coast. I don't know that this is anywhere that actually exists in real life.
No,
Are you
it's
just
not.
are you just making up scenes to kind of facilitate the idea of getting it sold, or are you drawing a fantasy scape of what you wish was there? How are you coming up with the subject matter in the paintings?
Honestly, I could only paint palm trees, so that's what I painted.
Oh, okay, that's so perfect. That's right. And let's remember, this is not a critique. This is not about comparing Heather Cook to Rembrandt, which actually you do pretty well compared to Rembrandt.
I don't know who that is.
Rembrandt is a person that you and I will talk a lot about.
Ooh,
Rembrandt's a
I can't
famous
wait.
Dutch painter. Yeah.
Ooh.
So tell us about the ship. Tell us about the tall ship.
So the ship is the same thing. I was just painting things to try to sell to do what we needed. I don't know. This one never went anywhere, and I ended up keeping it because I couldn't figure out how to make the ship look like a ship. But I think more than anything, it was more of a safety. There's a lot of safety in this photo.
Tell me about the safety. What parts of the painting feel safe to you? What parts of the painting indicate or are symbolic of safety?
I love sunsets. Sunsets to me symbolize that we made it through. We're almost there. Like it's calm, it's mellow, sun's going down, things are winding down. I don't know. The sails are full, reflections bright, and it's just calm.
Artistically, this is fascinating to me. You indicated that you weren't quite sure how to make a ship look real. And I love that instead of just filling in details as you may think things were, you literally painted a black hole.
Yeah.
You painted a gap in your understanding. This represents a gap in things you don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, this one actually, this one speaks to me quite a bit. Okay, this one I'm dying to have you tell me about this one because you should.
Okay.
In fact, I had to squeeze this one out of you. I'm like, no, show me that one. Show me that one. Show me that one. Okay, tell us about this piece. I love this piece.
Okay, this piece was quite challenging to me because in my world at this time, I was surrounded by a lot of people that told me painting is a career that will get you nowhere. Absolutely nobody in my world believed in painting and art. In fact, I completely stopped painting for about probably 15 years after I painted this picture. And I got up one day and I took every single thing that I owned and I bought one canvas, and every single thing on this painting in this picture came from a part of my life. So the come into my world is written in shoelaces from the very first pair of shoes that I ever wore to public school. The paper that is around the word world came from the very first art book that was actually mine that a teacher from school gave me. The mask represents the people in my world and the religion that refuse to take off the mask and show who they really are, because in my world, religion teaches to put on masks, and the more masks we put on, the more of ourselves we lose. And
That's
I
a
think
big mood
that
in my
there's-
life. That's a big mood in my life.
But I think that there's absolute place for religion. I think that there's just a there's an idea there where people feel like that you have to live a certain way, and yet the people who were living that way were living authentically true to who they truly were. It
Mhm.
wasn't that we're supposed to recreate who they are. It's that we're supposed to learn from what they do and did and expand on that. And the only way to expand on anything is to be true to who I am. I can't expand if I'm not being true.
I'm snapping because that's the cool way we clap.
Yes.
That's the way the cool kids clap. That's right. We snap. Snaps for Heather.
Yes. I remember the very first time I ever went to, like, the first time I remember somebody saying something in church that was relevant to me. And I turned to my dad and I asked him, if Jesus died on the cross for me, why does it matter what I do? And
That's
he
a
told
great
me,
question.
and he told me, that's not something you ask in church. And I was like, fine. And so I waited till I got home and I asked my siblings, and I said, if
Because you weren't
Jesus
in church.
already died for us, why does it matter what I do? And nobody could ever answer that question for me. And the thing that I realized is that Jesus died on the cross for an idea that was an absolute amazing idea, because an idea is the only thing that religion can't take.
Mm.
But if we want to, we can expand on those ideas, and we can make religion better and greater. And I don't know. I'm kind
Did
of
you know?
getting lost in religion here.
No. It's good. Did you know that one of the recurring themes year in and year out of Sunstone is that there is more than one way to Mormon?
Yes.
That's the theme. And I hear you talking about an expansive view of your own Mormonism. As you kind of shed one view of it, you're taking on some new ideas. And even when you're in it and you're trying to make sense of the atonement and what you can ask a church and what you can't ask a church, you're continually trying to expand and push the boundary of how you are experiencing your Mormonism.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we have one more or two more. Oh yeah, we have this one, and then so it's 12:03, and I think we're scheduled to end at 12:20, and I want to give it 15 minutes or so for questions. So tell us about this piece.
So this piece isn't a painting. There's actually no paint on it. It's made out of ink and plaster. What else is on there? Paper towels, random things. And to me, this absolutely represented a shedding of one and into the next. Because in order to expand and to grow, there has to be compassion for what was, and trust that what will come will be even better, because I can learn from what was and take it into what is going to be without the hate or the blame or the shame or the guilt, because none of that is relevant.
So this layer that's closest to the viewer is the here and now or the past, and you're unzipping a path and a view into the future. Is that what we're seeing here?
Absolutely. And
tell me about the symbolism of the red ellipses that kind of weave their way up that zippered portion.
So there's actually a big black butterfly that goes right there that I just barely realized isn't there. It fell off the other day.
We can imagine it.
And so it's supposed to be the trail, but the butterfly is flying. So the background is kind of just a light purple, but it's mostly white. So it represents it's new. You're not quite sure what's in that world. It's just kind of the soft overview of it. There's no detail or anything because it's unknown. But then there's this big, beautiful butterfly that's flying out of it. the deeper colors are following it.
So butterflies often are used in art to symbolize a transition or a new awakening, a new beginning.
Hmm.
Is that how you interpreted the use of the butterfly in
I
your
did,
piece?
yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
How old were you when you made this piece?
I made this piece in 2015, I think.
Okay.
So I was 23,
Okay. Tell us about
24.
this work, your bead work.
Okay, so my jewelry I make in meditation as a form when I can't handle whatever my emotions are going through. I use the beads to help me meditate and find my path and my way. And I often find that the beads will follow in what they, so different stones have different healing properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so the different stones often represent the healing that I'm going through at that point in that time. This one means a lot to me because it represents a path and a journey that I have taken in going from all of the crazy artwork that I showed before into this new transformation, into this new me, I guess, where there's color and there's feathers and there's life and there's a lot of different, if you can see, there's tiny beads and bigger beads and
Mm-hmm.
tons of colors and shapes and a new reality.
And each of these beads represents an emotion, a piece of your life, a part of your story.
They do. So, I
Because
don't know,
what
do you
I'm
want me to
seeing is like,
expand on that?
well, I just see an autobiographical piece of art. This is a story, and you're creating this autobiography as a result of having a heightened emotional response. You're having a difficult time in that moment, handling your own emotions. So dang it, I'm going to use beadwork and creating to tell a story about what I've gone through or what I'm feeling. This is an incredible emotional regulation skill. This is actually an act of mindfulness. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Wasn't actually.
Being in the moment,
Mhm.
mindful awareness. I also want to talk for a minute about narrative therapy. And there's Bessel van der Kolk. He talks about narrative therapy in his book called The Body Keeps the Score. Kids at home, you're going to want to get this from your non-Amazon bookstore. Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, talks about trauma and talks about the healing properties of narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is you telling a story of your trauma and your life. You, in doing this artwork, you are tapping into the properties of healing from trauma through owning and telling your story without shame, without guilt, and without fear. You're healing your body from trauma when you paint these pieces, when you do your beadwork, when you share with others, when you tell your story today, right now. You're healing from trauma. And I've seen some somatic responses in you during our presentation, mostly while we're sharing the screen. You've been doing some self-regulation of, some swaying and some things to kind of calm yourself down. And that's all fine. And I'm not pointing those out to the audience to shame you. I'm just saying that this is what you're going through in this presentation. You're feeling some of your feelings.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like that all people in every walk of life goes through trauma, because trauma is one of the greatest ways that we can learn and grow and expand if we can take those moments and turn them into growing moments instead of the shame and the guilt and the blame. And so often so often it's so much easier to turn to that blame of, you're so stupid for doing that, or that's a dumb response, what are you doing, instead of saying, oh, that actually makes me feel not very good when I do that. Let me readjust that and respond differently.
Perfect. So you've learned through necessity about some emotional regulation and some coping skills.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You're absolutely brilliant. I just love you to death, Heather, and it's been such a thrill to get to meet you. And I love that. I kind of love that this presentation right now is actually just kind of an extension of all the ones that we've had in the past.
It is kind of fun.
All right, so I'm gonna actually ask Jennifer to come back in, and if there are any questions from the audience, this is a perfect time. I think we have about 10 minutes left to
Oh,
take a few
perfect.
questions from the audience. Yeah.
Great. We do have a couple of questions. This has been fantastic. I was assigned this session. I didn't ask for it, and I'm super glad that I got to sit in here. I actually have a bachelor's in design, and I recently started painting over the summer due to some traumatic experiences. So it's been exciting to listen to someone else, right? Talk about their
Snaps for Jennifer.
experience with art. It's fantastic. Thank you, girls, from me, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think
You're
you're
welcome.
connecting. I think you're connecting with other people in the audience too. So here's some questions. Here's the first one. When I look at your wonderful pictures of the coast and also the dark ship, I really experience them on a temperature level. Hot red and cool blue or warm sunset. I'm curious if you think of color as temperature and how that relates to painting your experience and feelings.
I'm just actually recently learning about temperature and how it plays its role in the photo, but I feel like that I definitely do that on a more subconscious level than knowing that I'm actually doing it. Does that make sense?
You're totally making sense. Keep going. Keep going.
I totally lost what I was saying.
Well, and I want to point out to the people that are watching this, Heather is untrained. Heather has no classwork in theory, color theory, emotional theory as it ties to color, design, composition, texture, negative space, positive space, pattern, repetition, shape, all the things that we teach, as you know, in Jennifer, in design school.
I don't know any of those.
You don't know these things. And so that's okay. And that's my point of talking about the black ship is a black ship because it represents literally a void in your knowledge. Now I'm going to back up just a few minutes and talk about this word or this name that I shared with you earlier. I mentioned the name Rembrandt and you said, I don't know who that is. So so Rembrandt is probably the most famous Dutch master of all time, a painter, and was a tremendous influence all across Europe and into North America and the Americas in the 1600s, late 1500s, I think 1600s. He's kind of set the standard for many painters that came after himself. I know this because I have all this blah, blah, blah in art history. You don't know these things, right? So you don't know these things. And I'm not saying this to point out a flaw in you. I'm saying these things to point out a strength in you, that you're making this art in kind of a vacuum. You're making this art in the way that indigenous people made for millions of years, not knowing about other art styles, not knowing about other artists, responding to trauma, responding to stories, feeling the need to tell a narrative, feeling the need to emotionally self-regulate. You are creating your art in a vacuum and in a bubble. And it's amazing. It's amazing, A, that you were able to make any art at all. And we've talked about you using the mud and the clay and the cement and the plaster and all the things that you just found objects. But then you're moving into more dedicated materials, canvas, paint, some brushes, with an eye towards some compositional elements and more storytelling. So I just think it's fascinating from an artistic point of view that you are creating this art in a giant vacuum, a giant bubble. So it is not to point out a deficit in you or to shame and guilt you. Rather, it's to point out a strength in you and a source of resilience that you've done this. No, and it's true. And I don't lie. Jennifer, any other questions?
I just was going to add, just to second Kimberly, this is extraordinary. Looking at your art, even though I've had training, I'm not sure that my work expresses as much feeling as yours does, Heather. So I hope that, I know you said that you took a break from art. I hope that you will keep pursuing it because it is clear you are an artist at heart. You have it. You are a natural. We do have more questions. I've got another one here. And this one is, what is your preferred medium when painting? Do you like watercolor, oil, acrylic?
I'm going to be honest. I've never had the opportunity to try a lot of things. The one time I tried watercolor, I absolutely hated it. But I think that had more to do with my lack of knowledge and patience.
And I'm a beginning watercolorist too, so I'll bring down my watercolors and we'll struggle together.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oil has always been my preferred, but I've actually never I've never actually done a full oil painting. And so acrylic is what all of my paintings are done with because they're cheap as hell, and water. You can wash them with water. You don't have to have any special anything to do it. And so I guess to answer that question, I look forward to letting you know when I try more.
Maybe we can do
I
like
think that's great. I was just going to ask, I mean, just for me personally, is there somewhere we can buy your art or that we can donate to your art supply and try to support you as you pursue this gift you've got?
There absolutely is. I have.
Oh, you muted yourself, Heather.
Heather, I think I accidentally muted you when I was trying to unmute myself. So can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Did that work?
I'm an epic,
there you go. Now you're back.
controller here. I'm an epic moderator.
So painting and selling my paintings is something like I actually realized is something I get to do as part of my journey. It absolutely terrifies me. I'm just getting my website up and my stuff up and going. It's going to be called Braving Curiosity, because in order to do anything, you have to have tremendous bravery. And in order to accomplish the goals that I want to accomplish, I have to approach it with tremendous curiosity, because curiosity is the only way to truly learn for me. So Braving Curiosity is my name.
That's beautiful. I love it. I think that's fantastic. We've got another question here, more coming in. Hopefully, you know, we're going to run out of time before you have to communicate with
I
all
just
these.
want to say too, before the question, Jennifer, I'm planning on going down to Short Creek in the next several months. I'm absolutely going to cull the bookstores for art history books, all kinds of different art books, theory books, and I'm going to scrounge around and find a shit ton of art supplies, and I'm going to bring them down to you, Heather.
Oh, you're so sweet.
That's right. I am that sweet, but it's because you need to do your art. You need to do your art, and I want to facilitate that. Yeah.
Second. Yeah. I think this is, you are gifted, and we want to support that. So thank you. As I hear you talk about your artwork, I hear some great untangling of the traumas of your life. Can you talk a little about this being the untangling, and more specifically, the healing through art? I'm an artist as well, and my therapist has asked me to heal through art. I usually paint delightful things, but say something about painting the darkness.
I love that question, and I'm going to let you answer that, Heather.
Okay.
That's a question for you. It's not a question for me.
My 5-year-old actually walked in and I got distracted. Would you mind reading it again?
How are you healing? I'll let Jennifer ask it again.
Sure, I'll reread it. This is pretty detailed.
Yeah.
As I hear you talk about your artwork, I hear some great untangling of the traumas of your life. Can you talk a little about this? This being the untangling, and more specifically, the healing through art. I'm an artist as well, and my therapist has asked me to heal through my art. I usually paint delightful things, but please say something about painting the darkness.
So the darkness is something that I found. Okay, so this question this question is extremely deep and extremely personal, because everybody has a dark side inside of them, and everybody's dark side is represented and encouraged in different ways. My dark side, I have had to walk alongside with and get in touch with, to the point where it's a yin and a yang for me. My dark side is equal to my light side, because without the balance of both, I can't have the depth in my world that I need. And so there is a part of my dark side that still holds a tremendous pain. And even right now, my heart is beating and my hands are sweating and my words will probably start trembling, because that side is still inside of me. It's still there. It's still a part of me. But it's also equal to my light side. And so in my paintings and in my work, I add the dark underneath the light, because it adds the depth for the light to shine brighter.
Heather, I love that. Thank you for sure. No, I'm serious. Thank you for sharing that. For you not to be having some sort of a somatic response, for you to not be having shaky voice, sweaty palms, trembling hand, for you not to have that would tell me that you're less than human, that you've isolated your feelings from your body, and that is an unhealthy
Oh, yeah.
coping skill. So, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with not only me and Jennifer, but there's 15 people that are watching. Oh, I meant to say 15,000 people that are watching.
This has been amazing. It's been so great to hear you. We're out of time, unfortunately. There are more questions here in the Q&A. I think people would really like to connect with you, Heather. So I hope that you can work with Kimberly if maybe the tech is not your thing, right? And get into the Q&A section and connect with some of these individuals who'd really like to learn more about you and your art and your experience with art and trauma. Is there anything
Absolutely.
else that you want to say quickly before we close, Heather?
I really want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this session and to learn and to expand, and it was really, really hard for me to actually show up and turn on the camera and to sit here and to share parts of my story, because I don't know, it's hard to share parts of me. But I know that it's absolutely necessary, and I'm so incredibly grateful that you took the time today. So thank you.
And Heather, I want to debrief with you later on today too.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer.
This was beautiful, ladies. Thank you very much. Just as a reminder, this session is recorded, and it'll be available on the Whova app starting in August. So pass it on to your friends because it was epically great. Thank you, Heather and Kimberly, for being here with us, and thank you, participants, for being here with us at Sunstone. Goodbye.